Coming to you live from Mr. Marshall's backyard. Social studies. Alright, today we're picking up on lesson 3. This time we're talking about growing cities, big cities. How big? Very big. Now, the city that we know today with these huge skyscrapers and giant buildings and street corners with all these lights and all that stuff, that did not exist until the late 1800s. There are many technological advances and advances in building techniques that make the current city today possible. And so what we're going to talk about today is, how did these cities get so big? How are they growing so quickly? What type of things happened that made it possible for these cities to get so big? So, have your notebook out, have your pencil, and we'll get started.
All right, 5th grade, so you got your notebooks out, you got your pencil out, ready to write just a few things down today for lesson 3. We're on growing cities. All right, our objectives today. First one, explain how and why cities grew during the late 1800s and early 1900s. And second one, describe effects of technology and rapid growth on cities. All right, you can take a look in the background there. Immigrants. That's one reason why cities ended up growing a lot. You had a lot of immigrants coming in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and when they were looking for work, they went to cities to go find some jobs. Not a whole lot of jobs out in the country in rural America. In the late 1800s, you have cities that grow because businesses and factories, they become larger. Chicago, that's in the background there. You have the city of Chicago. Over here, this is what it used to look like when it was still being built. Now this is in the background what it kind of looks like today. You have Mississippi River, Lake Michigan, and railroads. That's what makes Chicago an excellent spot to start a city. You can move logs, you can move wheat, cattle, corn with the rivers, with the lake, and with the railroads. So these stockyards start popping up, which are basically like urban farms that hold lots of animals. Make sure you write down stockyards as a vocabulary word, a fenced-in area where a large number of animals are kept until they're used for food or moved to another place. Between 1870 and 1920, you have the population growing from 300,000 all the way up to 2.7 million people. So very rapid growth. Here's a chart. You can see, and you can compare some cities. For example, let's look at New York here. New York in 1860, it has 1.174 million. And in 1900, it is more than double, actually triple that size. And then you have a city like Chicago, 100,000 in 1860, and grows by 16 times the size in just 40 years. So a huge period of growth. If you also look at rural, that means like country, anything that's not in the city. And then you look at urban, that means like in the city, our population. In 1860, you can see America's population is mostly rural. But you fast forward to 1920 and it's about 50-50. And if this kept going today, you'd see that most people now actually live in the urban setting, not so much in the rural setting. So this number here, like from 1860, these two would be like flipped today. We have a lot more people living in urban than in rural communities. All right, here's another chart. You can see this one goes all the way up to 1990. Just like I explained before, you can see that you have the total urban population and total rural population. And this is what it looks like now. This is the urban population. So it looks like about 75% of our nation lives in the city, whereas only about 25% live in the country. And if this kept going, once again, this is only 1990, but if it went all the way up to 2020, you'd see that the numbers, this chart would continue to go up a little bit. All right, this is a picture of a guy. He's taking his lunch break here. Back when they used to build these skyscrapers, there weren't a whole lot of safety regulations, and so not a lot of safety equipment. You just kind of sit on the steel beams and you get your work done, and when you're done, you're kind of lowered down to safety. So there are lots of big changes in cities, such as the skyscraper. Like you can see this guy's building one here. Chicago had the first one. It was a skyscraper, you can write that down, just a very tall building. One thing that allowed for this was steel frames, like Carnegie Steel. His steel frames that he created in his factory, he would sell those, and those would be used to create these huge buildings. Also, electricity. Nikola Tesla, he was big in this movement. You know him from the car. He was an immigrant from Croatia. They found ways to send electricity through wires. Elevators were another advancement. So they did not have elevators before. Lights for theaters now that you have electricity, and rapid transit vehicles, kind of like subways you could think of, or like electric rails that you may see around. Like an electric train, basically, rapid transit vehicles. But with all this growth also came problems like slums, so poor, crowded parts of the city. Not very safe places. Also, the buildings weren't built very well, so they could catch on fire easily or break down easily.
A little bit more about Tesla, 5th grade. So you know the name Tesla because of the car, but he was also a famous inventor that was around in the late 1800s, early 1900s. In, I think it was lesson 1, you saw Thomas Edison, the famous inventor, and he did a lot of work with electricity. He was focused mainly on DC current or direct current, whereas Tesla, he worked with alternating current. Alternating current is what we use in our homes today. It can send a lot more energy a lot faster than direct current. Now, these two, you had Tesla and you had Edison, they were kind of rivals. Edison thought that direct current was the way to go. Direct current was safer, and it was going to be in every home in every city. Tesla thought that direct current wasn't that great because it wasn't as powerful. And so he tried to make sure that alternating current was the one that everyone was using. In the end, Tesla actually wins. Alternating current is the stuff that we use today. And he actually partnered with J.P. Morgan, who at that time started the company General Electric. Just like we talked about Carnegie and Rockefeller with Carnegie Steel, Rockefeller Oil, J.P. Morgan was on that same level, extremely, extremely wealthy, and just about had a monopoly on America's entire electricity market.
Which leads us to helping each other. You have the Hull House in Chicago here. Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr, those two you can write down who they were. Jane Addams, Ellen Gates Starr. They opened the Hull House. This was a settlement house, a community center for people in cities. So when people came here, they would get taught things like English. They could also get help finding a job or getting their medical needs taken care of. And we're on to the summary. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, immigrants and people from rural areas moved to cities. Technology changed urban life. Settlement houses helped people in cities solve their problems. 2 questions at the end for you to think about. Why and how did cities grow during the late 1800s and early 1900s? And describe the effects of technology and rapid growth on cities.
Let's talk about those last 2 closing questions that I had on the social studies slides. So the first one, why and how did cities grow during the late 1800s and early 1900s? Well, there were 2 big reasons. One, you had lots of immigrants coming, and they were all looking for jobs. There were a lot more job opportunities in the city than there were in the country. Second reason, you have things like skyscrapers, which make it possible for all these people to live more closely together because they're building upward instead of having to build outward. Let's look at the second one. All right, it says describe the effects of technology and rapid growth on cities. Well, technology like Tesla's AC current made it possible to have electricity in these buildings. It made it possible for things like elevators and rapid transit and lights on the streets, which not only meant that people had lights in their homes, but that people could stay up later. People could work longer hours and get more things produced. So all those things combined meant that cities were able to grow more and more quickly. What's that? Crickets in the background, because you thought I forgot about the index card. Nope. Next state index card. The state of Idaho. Idaho, that's the land of the potatoes. Why? Well, watch that video. You'll find out.